Hi again, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and having a good holiday season. Getting closer to a new year, hopefully a better year. So I'm gonna read another spooky story. I'm gonna hop right into this. This is called Christmas Tree Decorations. It was Christmas Eve, and an 11-year-old French girl named Juliet was decorating the Christmas tree. Her mother was working as a nurse at the local hospital, and the two of them lived alone in a small apartment in the suburbs of Paris. Late that evening, Juliet's mother called to say she would not be home until late that night. Juliet continued to decorate the tree with all of the lovely things her mother had bought at the shop. She draped some multicolored Christmas lights around the tree and hung beautiful ornaments on the branches. After placing the angel on top of the Christmas tree, she finally finished decorating and sat down to relax and watch some TV. Even though she was all alone in the sixth floor apartment, Juliet felt safe as she gazed out across the lights of the Parisian city. From her window, she could see the Eiffel Tower and the Champs de Mars. Most of the other tenants in the building had gone home to spend Christmas Eve with their relatives in the countryside. The apartment building was almost deserted. Juliet was growing bored waiting for her mother to return. Suddenly, she thought she heard a scratching noise at the front door. There was an eerie silence. Curious, she slowly approached the door and looked through the peephole. To her surprise, she saw a man standing outside, dressed in a red suit with fluffy white trim. He was large and fat with a dirty gray beard and wore a red hat on his head. He knocked at the door loudly. Nervous and concerned, she asked through the door, "Who's there?" "It's Santa Claus," the man replied. "Let me in. I'm cold and I'm tired and I'm hungry." At this, a chill went down Juliet's spine. She was no dummy. She knew that whoever this creepy man was, he wasn't Santa Claus. "My mother isn't home right now," he said, her voice shaking. "Please leave." Peering through the peephole, Juliet watched as the man's eyes filled with anger and his face twisted into a grimace of hate. He began knocking at the door even harder and rattling the doorbell. "It's Santa Claus, Juliet," he growled. "Have you laid out some milk and cookies for me, Juliet? You know how much Santa loves his milk and cookies." The young girl had a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. How did he know her name? Then the man began kicking and pounding at the door. She peeked out again and saw him reach into his coat pocket and pull out a switchblade. He shoved the knife into the keyhole and tried to pry it open. Juliet was terrified. She didn't know what to do. "If you don't go away, I'll call the police," she shouted. All of a sudden, the knocking stopped. Juliet stood perfectly still, afraid to move. Minutes passed, and she had started to think that the man might have been scared away by her threat. She slowly approached the door and looked through the peephole to see if the man was really gone. The hallway seemed to be empty. Suddenly, she saw the man running down the hallway with an axe in his hand. Juliet screamed and ran to the closet in a panic. She crouched down and hid behind the coats as tears of fright rolled down her cheeks. She heard the boom, boom, boom as the man tried to smash down her front door. There was a mighty crack as the door gave way and the man came crushing through the splintered wood. Laughing to himself, he called out, "Juliet, my pretty, where are you, Juliet? Don't be afraid. We'll have ourselves some fun tonight. Where are you hiding?" The crazed intruder walked around the house, searching for the frightened girl. Juliet curled up in the closet, trembling with fear. She dreaded to think what he planned to do to her. Suddenly, the handle of the closet moved up and down. Then, the door began shaking and she heard the man's voice laughing. "Juliet, I know you're in there," he said. "Open up for Santa. Open up before I open you up." The man swung his axe, and it struck the closet door with a huge bang, tearing into the flimsy wood. Juliet screamed and began crying bitterly. She grabbed a wire coat hanger and twisted it into a point. She waited, her eyes open wide and her hands were trembling. There was another loud crash, and the closet door gave way in a hail of splinters. The horrible man tore the doors off their hinges and thrust his head in between the coats. He was laughing and drooling like a madman as his huge, gnarled hands grabbed at the horrified girl. Juliet held up the pointed end of the coat hanger and bravely thrusted it into the man's face. It went straight into his eye. He recoiled in pain, screaming with rage as blood flowed down his cheek. He ripped the wire out of his eye socket and grabbed Juliet by the hair. Then he dragged her, kicking and screaming, out of the closet. The man pushed her to the ground and held her tightly by the neck, leaning over her. Blood spilled out of his eye, splattering all over her face. His mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, and he whispered in her ear, "Tonight, You will be privileged, my lovely Juliet. I've got a list and I've checked it twice. I'm here to decide if you've been naughty or nice. You can scream and beg for your life, but naughty girls get the axe and nice girls get the knife. It was after midnight when Juliet's mother returned home. She saw the front door hacked to pieces and rushed inside to look for her daughter. Gazing around at the carnage, her eyes struggled to take it all in. Then she began screaming in absolute horror. The Christmas tree was decorated with Juliet's entrails, and her severed head was perched on the top. That one was actually pretty gruesome. I think I've got time for one more. So let's go ahead and hop into another. This one is called Sock Puppet. Many years ago, in Ireland, there was a wealthy man who lived in a small village. He owned every single plot of land surrounding the village and rented them out to poor farmers as a tidy profit. The man lived in the biggest house in the village with his lovely wife, his two strong sons, and a small, sickly daughter. He was kind to all of his children and treated his wife like a queen. However, in business he was ruthless and cunning. He made a lot of money by charging the villagers high rents and treated all of his tenants as if they were slaves. If any one of them was behind with their rent, he would throw them out of their houses in a moment's notice. The villagers hated the rich man and despised his cruel and miserly ways. He often threw lavish parties, inviting only his friends and family and living like a king while the poor villagers had to scrimp and save just to keep their bellies full. All they could afford was a meager diet of bread and potatoes. One year, there was a potato blight and all of the crops were affected. As winter set in, the villagers were starving to death. The rich man paid no attention to the troubles of his tenants and responded by raising the rents. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he threw a Christmas party for his friends and family, where they enjoyed an enormous feast and drank sarcastic toasts to the plight of the starving tenants. That night, one villager arrived at the door bearing a gift. He said it was a Christmas present for the rich man's daughter. The girl opened the present and found a sock puppet inside. The villager said he had knitted it himself and asked if he might have some food. In return, the rich man handed the villager one single, solitary potato and sent him on his way. Although it was a hideous old rag, the daughter seemed to love the sock puppet. She named it Charlie and put it on her hand, showing it to everyone at the party. That night, after the party was over, the father was going to bed. He paused at his daughter's bedroom door and looked in on her. She was fast asleep. Just as he was about to leave, something disturbed him. The sock puppet was still on her hand, and its plastic eyes seemed to be staring straight at him. He ignored it and walked away, thinking he was just imagining things. That night, as the rich landlord and his wife slept in their chamber, they heard a knock at the door. It was their daughter. "Mama, Papa, Charlie says he needs to speak with you," she said. They saw their daughter walk in, blood dripping from one hand and the sock puppet on the other, staring at them both. "Charlie already spoke with Jacob and Michael," said the daughter, moving the sock puppet's mouth as if it was speaking. "Now he must speak with you." For weeks, the rich man's house lay eerily silent. The villagers saw no candles in the windows and no smoke from the chimney. Eventually, they decided to check on the family, and what they discovered shocked them to their very core. In the living room sat the two brothers, both strong young men, had their heads twisted off and placed on their hands as if the heads were puppets. The same happened to the parents, who were found dead and decaying in their beds. The most disturbing sight of all was the little girl. She was sitting in the corner of the bedroom, her severed head balanced upon one hand, smiling sweetly with her eyes wide open. On the other hand was the sock puppet. Due to the rigor mortis, her arms were sticking out, and it seemed as if the two hands were speaking to each other. Just recently, a family moved into the house. They moved to the country because the family doctor said it might help their sick daughter recover from her illness. Everything was fine until one night, when the mother heard the daughter calling out to her. Before the mother opened the door, she heard the daughter talking. She peeked in and the girl was fast asleep. "What did you need, honey?" asked the father when his wife returned. The mother paused before speaking. "I have no idea," she said. "The poor little thing must have been talking in her sleep. Do you know where she got that awful sock puppet? She was wearing it on her hand and it almost seemed like it was staring straight at me." Yeah, I'm going to read you guys one more, and then I will have to go do other things. This one is called The Grither. It was Christmas Eve and the family were gathered in the living room. The father was reading the newspaper and the mother was knitting a sweater. The children, Jimbo and Steffa, were stretched out on the floor with their crayons and their coloring books. Tell us a story, Steffa demanded. Yes, a scary one, Jimbo insisted. All right, said their father. I'm going to tell you about the most fearsome, dangerous, and appalling creature in the world, and it's called the Grither. Oh, now you've done it, said their mother. You said his name out loud. Who is he? Asked Jimbo. He's the most awful thing in the world, their father said. He lives in a cave at the North Pole. The coldest, wettest place on Earth is where the Grither makes his home. He sleeps in the wreck of a ship that somehow got squeezed into the mouth of the cave. He doesn't mind the cold, and he doesn't mind the wet, but the thing he hates most of all is to hear someone say his name. He has very good ears, and they get bigger every time his name is spoken anywhere on Earth. Sometimes his ears get so big, he can use them to fly. I don't like this story, Steffa whined. It's too late now, her mother said. We've already mentioned his name. The Grither is probably on his way to our house at this very minute. It'll probably take him a while to get here, said the father. If we finish the story before he gets here, everything will be fine. Do you know why the Grither is called the Grither? Why? The children asked. Because he has fists as big as basketballs and arms as long as boa constrictors, said their father, with a grin. Whenever he finds the people who have been speaking his name, he opens up his fists and reaches out his arms and he grithers them in. He grabs them by the head and squeezes them until they pop, just like a balloon. Does he look like Bigfoot? Jimbo asked. No, said his father. He's not like Bigfoot and he's not like the abominable snowman either. Nobody knows what he looks like for sure. The only people who have ever seen the Grither are the people the Grither has eaten. He's as tall as a tree, but he can bend all the way over and touch the ground. His skin looks like a road map because it's transparent, and all his blue and red veins show through. The blue is for fear, and the red is for rage. Hurry up and finish the story. Before he gets here, Steffa cried. The Grither was born on a sailing ship, said the father. It was blown off course by a storm and got lost in the Arctic Sea. They drifted around for weeks and never saw anything but glaciers and icebergs. Some of the passengers drowned, some froze to death, some starved, and the rest committed suicide. The Grither was born out of the fear and rage of all those people. But why does he kill people? Jimbo asked. Nobody knows, said the father. He just doesn't like anyone telling his story. Is that all? Steffa asked. Is that the end of the story? Not quite, said her father. There's only one way to protect yourself from the Grither. Maybe you should stop, their mother interrupted. I think you've scared them enough. Their father chuckled. You don't believe in the Grither, do you? He asked. No, the children lied. Well, you shouldn't, their father said, because I made it all up. There's no such thing as the Grither. But you didn't finish the story, Steffa whined. All of a sudden, the door blew open, and the room was enveloped in an icy blast of wind. There was a crash and the sound of breaking glass. Then two huge, gnarled arms reached in through the windows and grasped their parents by their heads. As the children watched in horror, the hands squeezed, and their parents' heads popped, just like two balloons. So I think that will be the end for this episode. It's actually like I didn't expect them. I don't read these before I read them to you. So I didn't expect them to be so gruesome. They're a lot more gruesome than I was expecting. um, so yeah, I really I thank you guys so much for watching and being here. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. And I will see you guys next time.